It's no secret that Game of Thrones' final season was disappointing. A lot of people were done dirty, with the ones done worse being the audience. Call it rushed, call it stupid, call it whatever you want. Just don't call it late for dinner, am I right?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Together we're gonna go through a rewrite of this last season to see if we can weave something better from this tangled mess. And we're gonna do it with the same number of episodes, same budget, and same cast. But, slight caveat. I'm assuming the ending we experienced was something relatively close to what George R.R. Martin envisioned. Well, we're gonna go ahead and choose an ending outside of the author's imagination. If Mr. Martin was unable to finish his series before the show, then he doesn't get his desired ending. Sorry.
Georgie! Oh, brother, this guy...
Let's begin. Now we're gonna fly through these first two episodes, because they're setups where I'm not changing much. Episode 1. Quick recap for the forgetters. Our gang of misfits gather at Winterfell. Back in King's Landing, Cersei hires Bronn as an assassin. But in this version, instead of being hired to put down the Lannister brothers, Bronn is hired to kill Dany. Because she's obviously the greater threat. Remember this assassination plot, because...
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
During episode 2, our misfits chit-chat in the lobby before a game of COD Zombies. Only change here is that Jaime still knights Brienne, but they do not start a relationship, because that's unnecessary. Men and women can be close without being lovers. Duh. Also, it would have been cool if Brienne was into Tormund, but she isn't, so we're respecting her wishes. Episode 3 is finally the Night of the Living Dead, and here our path will finally diverge. See, our Misfits' game plan is different. The aim in the show was to lure out the Night King, then murk him, but in this version, Bran reveals that killing the Night King is impossible, at least by normal means. Otherwise, someone would have done it already. The only way to stop the Night King is through Bran. He needs somewhat close proximity, let's say a few miles, or kilometers for you freedom haters out there, and he needs time. Then he can put an end to the Night King forever. So the battle isn't a trap, it's a war of attrition, meaning the tactics we see will have to change. No Dothraki charging out to their deaths. Our misfits wait for the army of the dead to siege Winterfell. The Unsullied form ranks just outside the gates, building a shield wall while archers rain down fire arrows on the armies of undead. Jon and Dany use their dragons to spit hot fire and provide support. When the Unsullied inevitably break, the dead climb on top of each other to mount the walls. And all sense of battle lines shatter, devolving the siege into a frantic melee. Bran continues channeling his magic. Dany and Jon face the Night King in aerial combat, while below, the defenders of Winterfell fight for their lives. Davos is killed by zomboids while fighting on the battlements. The Night King manages to kill Rhaegal, Jon's dragon, but also loses his own in the process. When Dany is knocked off her own dragon and almost killed, Jorah makes a last stand to ensure Dany's survival. As the Night King enters Winterfell, the battle continues to go south. A constant stream of endless undead rise to overwhelm our misfits and their men. In the retreat, Jon abandons Sam, which leads to Sam getting ripped to shreds. Elsewhere, Jaime and Brienne fight their way towards the Godwood, only to be nearly overrun. So, in a last moment of heroism, Jaime sacrifices himself to give Brienne time to escape. Meanwhile, the Night King approaches the Godswood. He faces and kills Theon, then faces Melisandre next, managing to withstand her flames. The Red Witch detonates herself to halt the King's advance, but it only slows him. So it comes down to Jon. He and the Night King duel then. Jon holds his own, but quickly tires. The Night King slowly gains the upper hand, smashing through Jon's defenses, until at last he gets the opportunity to strike Jon down. But at that moment, Bran completes his spell. What he was doing was reaching backward through time, across hundreds of years through the Night King's life. And once he reaches his enemy's weakest point, his origin, he wargs into the Night King, melding their minds into one. The union causes a feedback effect that explodes like a star, annihilating both the Night King and Three-Eyed Raven. We kick off episode 4 in the aftermath of the Battle of Winterfell. Bronn is captured trying to sneak into the castle, but Tyrion vouches for him, getting him released. Arya and the Hound head to King's Landing to acquire their respective revenges. Jon laments that he abandoned Sam, feeling less like a hero and more like a coward, even though he stood toe-to-toe with the Night King. Our Misfits armies head south. During the trip, Bronn realizes he can't get close enough to kill Dany, so he kidnaps Missandei instead. And when our misfits arrive at King's Landing, just like in the show, Cersei executes Missandei out of spite. Episode 5 commences the Battle of King's Landing. While the battle rages within the city, Arya and the Hound sneak past the defenders into the keep. The Hound faces off against the zombie mountain to give Arya time to slip past the Queen's guards. Arya manages to reach Cersei, cornering the Queen in her chambers and saying,
"This is for my father."
She then executes Cersei. Meanwhile, the Hound manages to kill the Mountain, but dies from his wounds. Cersei's guards burst into her chamber, finding Arya looming over the Queen's corpse. But even as the guards charge at her, the young Stark just smiles, accepting her fate now that her mission is accomplished. In the streets, the battle goes on. Jon gets an opportunity to push forward, but simultaneously notices that Grey Worm is about to be overwhelmed. So, remembering Sam, he fights to Grey Worm, rescuing him, and in the process, runs into Bronn. The two duel, and we all know how it goes. Jon is the superior combatant and gets the upper hand, disarming Bronn. But, in a desperate act, Bronn distracts Jon, then uses a hidden knife to stab him. Bronn is then incapacitated by Grey Worm, but it's too late. Jon is dead. Upon realizing this, Dany of course flies into a rage, and she burns the city that denied her and killed her lover, razing its streets and reducing her opponents to ash. Episode 6 begins with fire, then screams. We pan up from flame, through smoke, and see Bronn tied up above a brazier, being cooked alive. Dany watches from before the Iron Throne, gleefully enjoying the execution while her bannermen observe gravely. We go then to Tyrion, who has been imprisoned. Dany turned on him because of his vouching for Bronn. Varys visits Tyrion, recounting how the Lords of the Seven Kingdoms have come to the capital to show fealty, including a very reluctant Sansa. Varys then warns Tyrion that he'll likely be killed as a display of a traitor's punishment. Tyrion fears his death, but still has hope that he can wiggle out of it. After all, he always does. At the climax of the episode, we witness Tyrion's trial. The new queen accuses her former hand of treason due to him failing to protect her from an obvious threat, and due to his actions indirectly getting Jon Snow murked.
"You may have killed him,"
Dany says. Then she touches her stomach tenderly.
"but his legacy lives on. In me."
The trial goes about as well as you'd expect. It's rigged, there's no hope for any sort of justice. So, Tyrion, still resilient, does the only thing he can.
I demand a trial by combat.
In the silence that follows, we see the faces of the crowd. Most people are indifferent. Grey Worm, new captain of the Queen's Guard, is hungry for vengeance. Sansa is angry, openly showing disdain for the proceedings. Varys, the new Master of Whispers, and Brienne, new member of the Queen's Guard, both look troubled. Eventually, Dany responds to Tyrion's request for trial by combat.
"No."
Drogon then emerges. Brienne starts to step in to intervene, but Varys stops her. Drogon approaches Tyrion, who stares at the dragon, speechless. And as Daenerys Targaryen sits on the Iron Throne, she speaks the last word of the show.
Dracarys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.
This is a quote that has been stuck in my mind since I completed the saga that is Game of Thrones. Because it's a lie. The ending we got was, all things considered, pretty happy. And that rubbed people the wrong way. Because we don't come to Game of Thrones to see happiness. We want to be heartbroken, and moved, and shocked. Not that it has to be doom and gloom all the time, but the ending we got felt disingenuous. Things worked out a little too well. So I decided to replace all that light with something a little darker. My version of this story feels truer to the tone of Game of Thrones. I know in the last few seasons we moved closer to traditional fantasy and farther from subverting it, but I think this ending is a much needed return to form. Plus, it closes out a lot of arcs in a way more satisfying than the actual show. Specifically, in the OG, Arya didn't get an ending to her story. She was all about becoming an assassin for so long, yet the only person she killed was Walder Frey. Which, good for her I guess, but her main target was Cersei, for obvious reasons. Oh, and she killed the Night King too, but that was doo-doo writing. See my video on villains, specifically the connection section, for why. Also in the OG, Jaime basically did a 180 of his arc. What do you mean he goes back to Cersei?
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
As for OG Jon,
You are my queen. I don't know what else I can say.
enough said. And for Dany, I'm fine with her going mad. I just wish it'd been built up more. Since I didn't go back to prior seasons, I didn't build it up either, but instead went the route of tying her dark turn more closely to a grounded concept. In the show, she just kinda goes sicko mode on a dime, but here her wrath is bound to Jon's demise, which works better because it's far more tangible. Lastly, what I like about this rewrite is that its close isn't the ending, but an ending. Leaving open threads can be an effective way to conclude a story, if done correctly. In this case, we witness the beginnings of fractures in Dany's rule. Sansa is defiant, Varys is shaken. Is Dany actually pregnant, or just cray-cray? Will Brienne follow in Jaime's footsteps and become a Kingslayer? Who knows? The current finale is so boringly conclusive that there's not really any room or need for fan discussion. Whereas this one encourages theorizing and headcanoning in a way that extends the life of the saga, and builds an ending that doesn't just respect the characters, but also the audience. Anyway, that's all I've got for this one, folks. Like and subscribe if you're into this stuff, because I've got more essays, fixes, and rewrites coming down the pipeline. And speaking of, for my next rewrite...
It's my birthday. Now it's time for me to light my candles.
Until then, though, cheers.